I'm from Australia, so I don't speak Swedish, unfortunately, so apologies to everyone in the room who doesn't speak English. Is there anyone in the room who doesn't speak English?
How would you know?
Well, there we go. Exactly. How would I know? Okay. So my name is Molloy. I'm the president of Pirate Party Australia. And I'm basically going to talk to you about...
That was not you.
Not yet.
Okay. I'm basically going to talk about where we came from, why we exist, international cooperation, Pirate Parties International, and other fun things have been happening of late. And apologies if it's a bit all over the place. I've been very ill for the last few weeks, so I've had very little time to actually prepare. So Pirate Party Australia started in 2008 as a result of the international movement actually starting to take flight. We started around the core policy sets of transparency, intellectual property reform, privacy, digital and civil rights. And in Australia, our system requires that we have 500 members to register federally. So Australia is a federal country, meaning there's Australia, and then there's a bunch of states, which is kind of like your regions, and then we have local governments, which is also kind of like the local governments. So while they map, the reasons they exist are completely different. So if we register our party federally, we still have to register it separately in each state. So we can currently only run for federal government. So these bureaucratic requirements made it much more difficult and time-consuming to actually register our party. So while we may have started in 2008, it wasn't until 2013 that we were formally registered. And we took part in our first election that year. So before I explain our election, I'll explain our electoral system a bit because it's quite different to European systems. The closest system to the Australian one would probably be a mix between the Irish and the UK systems. So we have a bicameral parliament, meaning we have a lower and upper house. So we have the House of Representatives, which is a winner-takes-all election style system. So there's municipalities and you have one candidate per seat. And then you have the Senate, which is partially proportionate. So we have, for each state, we get to elect 6 senators each term. So technically you're electing 12, but every 3 years you only elect half. And it uses a voting system known as a preferential voting system called single transferable vote. So what this essentially means is instead of just having a sheet where you write the name of a party or mark an X in a box or a tick or draw a circle, you have to number each box. So when we ran in the largest state, New South Wales, there are 110 candidates. So people had the option of putting a 1 in the above the line box, which I'll explain in a moment, or filling out every single field below the line. And you could only make about 3 errors before your vote was considered invalid. So this, yes, this led to a scandal where all of the minor parties made magical deals, because above the line voting means that it automatically fills out the below the line based on what the party submitted. So you get to determine all the preferences on behalf of your party. The Pirate Party in Australia refused to take part in this process. We made it as transparent as possible and allowed our members to determine our preferencing. I had to fill out that form, all 110 names, and I screwed it up twice. I finally finished it the 3rd time around and went, I forgot the 4 independent candidates. Oh, they have no chance anyway, 107, 100. So we were widely respected for not taking the approach where we could potentially get a seat, because there was absolutely no chance it was going to get a seat, just the sheer number of candidates, the sheer amount of money needed, and just the whole bureaucracy around it. To get a seat in Australia, you need about $200,000, so about $1 million krona, just to have a chance of getting one of those 6 Senate seats, and that's just if you're running for the Senate. The costs of nominating a candidate are $2,000, so 14,000, yeah. And you have to nominate at least 2. So more than 50% of the money we had raised went towards just being able to put our name on the piece of paper in the first place. But the fact that we took the noble route of actually staying transparent and democratic, even though we only had 24 hours to take a party vote, that's how long. You submit all the names, I go, now fill out this form, you have 24 hours. So we've just gone, every member pay attention to your emails if you don't vote, sorry, keep up. You know the system, pay attention one day. And we had about 25% of our members respond. They ordered it very well. We ended up preferencing the Greens second, which was quite good because they're the closest party in Australia to us. And that got us attention in the media that we otherwise would not have gotten at all. It would have all been negative because immediately the minor party alliance was going around, and then the national broadcast was like, Pirate Party, how did you do things? Oh, well, we transparently and democratically preferenced. They're like, what is this? And their entire mind just exploded. And then it started a miniature scandal in the Greens Party because theirs is clearly centralised and backroom. So mostly what happens in Australia is the Pirate Party does a thing, and then something bad happens in the Greens. This seems to be the pattern. They see us to do this really cool thing, like, well, they're trying to build this online liquid democracy thing. We can't even do mailing lists, rabble. So this is basically how it goes. So we knew the chances of us getting elected in Australia were very low when we started. To get one seat, we need 14.3% of the vote. Yes. If we register in New South Wales, which is the largest state of Australia, we need 750 members. They all have to sign a paper form twice. One that they will mail to them, one that we get in advance. But we have a chance of getting a seat there, and pretty much only there, so that's what we'll be aiming for in the future, because we only need 2% of the vote there. And it's a denser area. Because one of the other issues is, like Sweden, 10 million people, very sparse. We have a similar problem, except ours is a bit more sparse. You can fly across Europe, or I can fly from my capital city to the nearest capital city. So it makes it difficult for us to host meetings, which is why, as a digital party, we really do the online thing quite well. So you're able to get the majority of the delegates in one room, whereas we just cannot afford it. We have no state funding, or never likely to get it, so everything has to be member funded. So all our meetings have at least an online aspect. So every year we have to host an annual general meeting, which we call a national congress. And it is simultaneously held in person and online using webcast and IRC. So there'll be a chair, but next to the chair is a remote chair. We're sitting on IRC and responding to people. So if a person wants to add themselves to the speaking order, they'll say, chair, thing I want, and then the thing that I actually want. So our standing orders take into account the ad hoc nature of what we have to do with. So if, for instance, the webcast goes down, because Australia is basically running off the smell of an oily rag, it happens about 20 times, they go, it's down, and we go, here. And we stand there for 10 minutes, go on a break, whatever, until it comes back, because we want everyone to be able to take part equally. We're doing this for 3 or 4 years, and it's worked every single time. We managed to finish our conferences in 2 days. The last one had 40 motions, and I think 3 or 4 discussion topics. So we fairly efficiently go through things. So for instance, with policy development, most of the development happens within the policy development committee over the previous 12 months. So there's very little left to be discussed. It's just an affirmation that this happened, the story of what happened, and any minor quibbles that are left are discussed at that time. And the people who are physically present or online, that isn't the final vote. They're merely voting to put it to all the members at the end of the conference. We have a 7-day online voting period. It's just a ballot with all of the motions and any of the elections, and it happens online by email. We get about 25 to 35% response rate. So last year, we had a motion which was to conditionally withdraw from Pirate Parties International, which I thought would be way more controversial than it was, yet still got 92% support from the member base. I'm like, wow, okay, so we are paying attention. So basically, Australia has always been a firm believer in international cooperation. That's the point of having an international network party, a digital party that actually understands the internet. You can't simultaneously say you're a party for digital rights and say, but we don't know how to communicate with someone in a different country. We just don't know how to internet. But that's largely what we found PPI was. In practical terms, each year, being a remote delegate was very difficult. It was almost impossible for the Australian delegation to be heard. We could not raise any points, we couldn't discuss things, and we had no ability to contact anyone. So after each Congress, after each General Assembly, we would send an email to the board saying, hey, here are the problems we identify, can you allow us to help you to fix these? They were not listened to. So 2011, 2012, 2013, you have to draw the line eventually. So 2013 we said, okay, what are the bare minimum requirements that we need to continue as members in this organisation before we say we draw the line and we walk away? And that was they held an online general assembly. They gave everyone equal access to try and fix this organisation that was unable to meet the requirements of a coordination for all parties. Add some more democracy, so delegates to send to the World Trade Organization, and just, we don't even know how they decided, there's no process for it, they just send a guy, it doesn't make any sense. Fixing the statute so you can't have a board that's 50% Germans, so there's actually representation, because one of the things of PPI was that you elect a board to represent all of the different parties, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's what they went with. And then instead of even having one delegate from at least different countries, you ended up with a very German-heavy board, and ultimately the board only ever once had a non-European representative. So it was pretty much Pirate Party Europe with an international spin, which never happened. So this ultimately culminated in us proposing an online General Assembly. We built it, we gave them everything, they took a vote, it passed, then they took another vote, and they cancelled it a month later, leading to so much ambiguity that we couldn't actually do anything other than leave, because you can't solve that level of broken. It is too much broken. When they can just randomly re-vote to cancel the General Assembly, that organisation is fundamentally dead. So we left. 2 weeks later, the United Kingdom left. Another week later, Belgium has left. And it looks like a few other countries who I will leave to themselves to announce in the next month or so are also going to leave. Which sounds bad. Pirates not working together is always bad. The problem, of course, was we were not granted the opportunity to work together in this. If it was any other structure, pirates would be burning it down. If your government doesn't represent you, you're on the streets protesting. However, in PPI, this was, no, we can't protest against the pirates. It doesn't make sense. That's not how it goes. Well, no, actually, it has to be how it goes. Otherwise, we are just repeating the same mistakes of the past. We aren't making anything better. We're just building bureaucracy's sake. So we're working on several international ventures. We always have. So historically, the German party created liquid feedback, an online direct democracy tool. We looked at it, we saw some deficiencies, and we decided we would try and build something new. So with Pirate Party Netherlands, Australia started on a project called the Molloy project, which was to build a deliberative online democracy system. Because as I said, Australia is so disparate, we need a way that we can properly build policy without having too much bureaucratic or actual movement burden. So it was always a strong interest of ours. That, of course, progressed very slowly. We're a very small party, and ultimately we ended up having an election occur and then just constant stuff. So it has more or less slowed down. But now that we no longer have to worry whether or not we will remain a member of PPI, we can actually just start building our connections naturally. Other parties are much more willing to speak now because it's renewed interest in cooperation. Because a lot of the feeling was that, well, we'll just sit and wait and see what happens. That was Sweden's position. That's why you joined as an observer member, the only observer member initially, just watching, going, it's broken, maybe I'll fix it. We tried, but there were problems. So now we launched just a wiki, just a simple wiki. It's not an organization, it's just a wiki and a forum. And within 2 weeks, 14 parties have listed their contact details, started comparing each other's party structures, discussing active projects, actually starting to try and organise around the TTIP, which is a massive thing that should already have been organised by PPI, because it's screwing everything up. Australia has a similar thing called the TPP, which you may not be aware of. But quite simply, remember ACTA, the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement? The reason that didn't work was because the EU, Europe, went, no. And then it died because it didn't have enough signatories. So America sat there and said, how can we fix this? Okay, we'll just separate the two groups. So now you've got the TTIP and you've got the TPP. The TPP is the Asia Pacific region with a bunch of essentially vassal states of the United States who will just do as they're told. The TPP is where the gold standard will be set. Life plus 7 years, pharmaceutical patents that can never end, temporary copies being banned. All of the stuff that we go, that sounds insane and won't work. They're going to put it in that one. They're going to put it in the TTIP, even if you kill it. And then it will come back in 5 to 10 years and go, well, 50% of the world that just does what it's told is doing it, so I guess you don't want preferred nation status. I guess you'll just have to be left behind. So this is the point of international cooperation. It is making Europeans aware that just sitting alone is actually detrimental to Europe as well, because you're blindsided by the fact that these things are happening outside the sphere of influence that will end up trampling you. And that's a net negative for everyone. We're also working on a journal. Pirate Party Iceland and Pirate Party Australia have decided to work together on building a pirate journal. So we have a mechanism for having formal discourse on research relating to pirate matters, critiques on pirate matters, basically what an academic journal is, but for the pirate movement. Which will be great, because then when anyone asks us, well, you say you're an evidence-based movement, what's that mean? It's like, well, we have an academic journal, what do you have? And you go, oh, well. So I'm really looking forward to that, because it's the first project that will finally actually encompass open, non-bureaucratic international cooperation between pirate parties that also includes non-European partners. So it actually demonstrates the international potential of the pirate movement. So Pirate Party Australia has just over 1,000 members now. When we started in 2008, 2009, we got about 500 members within 2 years. Back when we did that, it was still paper forms only, and the secretary at the time was not a paper person. So I became secretary in 2010 and had 3 different databases to deal with. So I got to know those slowly over time. They finally introduced digital memberships in 2011, and so then we sent a link to Reddit, and suddenly we had 750 members. So that went quite well. I remained secretary for 3 years, and in 2013 I submitted the forms to actually register our party, which was fun. Dealing with government bureaucracies and sending member lists is always fun. I'm sorry, this member you've sent doesn't seem to be a person. Yes, his name is John with an H. Oh, no, that's a person. We can look at the database. Or they will tell you, for instance, oh, you've submitted 550 names, but 25 of them aren't enrolled to vote, when the law just says eligible to be enrolled to vote. So, yeah, bureaucrats and law, and if you disagree with them, they go, well, you can sue us, but I mean, it takes some time. The first time we tried to register, I actually lost half our forms, blamed us. We're like, what? No, oh, sorry, we found it. It's too bad the election already happened, but we found it with another party. In Florida. So we appealed after they cancelled our registration. They agreed with all 3 points and then said, but no, if you want to appeal this further, it will cost you $750. But if you want to just try and re-register, it's only $500. We're like, oh, bastards. So yeah, we've always come up against bureaucracy. We've been active against ACTA, TPP, all of these things since we've begun. We've always worked more as an activist group and only turned into a party during election years. So we always send delegates to public briefings of TPP and ACTA. Public briefing means bureaucrat or a diplomat sits there and you ask them a question and they stonewall. But one fun question is something like, could you answer a question where you don't redefine yes as no? And then they go, damn it, no. Then they go, oh, you make us uncomfortable, can we have a private meeting? That was the best. They came up to me to ask me to have a private meeting because I was making them uncomfortable. So we get to sit there with them and discuss the TPP. And I ask the question, how much of this is more or less just a copy and paste of ACTA? And the lead negotiator is like, oh, that's a loaded question, don't you think? I'm like, okay, let me ask the question I want to ask. Can you just show me the document? And she's like, well, no, I'm like, okay, so seeing as I'm not allowed to just see the thing, and you won't answer direct questions, I get to play this stupid game. So we're going to continue playing it. It's not a loaded question. And if it were, why did you load the gun in the first place? You are the negotiator that wrote ACTA. You are, it's just like, I didn't write it. It's like the lead negotiator for Australia does the work for America. It's just like, you want to hear about America. And now because I've made her angry, she's now ranting about the United States Trade Representative. She's like, it's run by corporations. They have direct access to everything. They have online editing of these treaties, blah, blah, blah. It's like, very interesting to hear from the lead negotiator the actual truth behind how this works. This is what we've always assumed, to hear it actually out of their mouth because it's now a private meeting. Nothing will leave this room, of course, right? It's a private meeting. It's absolutely off the record. I'm from a party of transparency and I'm currently writing notes, but it's entirely off the record. Yeah, do that for 5 years. I mean, that's just what we do. So yeah, long story short, Pirate Party Australia is a party in the middle of the sea, in the middle of nowhere, that wants to really work with the rest of everyone, and we're doing our best to do that. We're pushing the movement as hard as it can and as comfortably as we can make it to make it clear that the international movement wants to be international. South America wants to be involved as well, but their English speaking skills aren't as strong as ours, so we have to advocate on their behalf as well. So we're trying to say it's an international movement, not a European movement. It may have started in Europe, but it affects all of us. And if we honestly want to change copyright and intellectual property law, we have to do it all together, because almost every country in the world is a signatory to these treaties. We want to tear it apart, and you can't tear it apart as just the EU, or as Europe, or as Eurasia. You need everyone. So thank you for inviting me. I'll be around until June. I'm studying here, so we can always have coffee and chat and rant and drink. Thanks.